where, we can feel a little proud of ourselves. So now, I watched President Obama fill out his bracket on ESPN, as he has done every year of his presidency, and the glaring thing that jumped out at me on his bracket was there were almost zero upsets. Like, the only upsets were 3s over 2s, maybe a 10 over a 7, a 9 over an 8. There was not one, I don't think there was one 1 through 6 seed that lost in the first round on his bracket. And I can guarantee you that more than one of the 1 through 6 seeds will lose in the first round of the tournament. It happens every year, okay? So that's why, one of the best things you can do when you're researching your picks, is look for teams that have weaknesses, like, oh, well, this is a really good high-seeded team that won a lot of games, but holy cow, they turn the ball over a ton. And they don't get a lot of turnovers. So that's maybe, boy, if they run up against a team that protects the ball well and, creates turnovers well, that could spell an upset, And that's a formula that I liked a lot, as you'll see when picking first-round matchups in this year's tournament. But just one example. There will be upsets. You have to pick some sleepers. Now, that being said, you don't necessarily want to be picking too many, if any, teams to make the Final Four that are not a top 4 seed in their own side. Sometimes a 6 through 11 seed can make it to the Final They almost never win the championship. It's happened maybe once or twice, a few times I should say, but extremely rare. So the other things we're trying to do is we're trying to play the odds, okay? Right after I say, pick upsets, I say play the odds. You have to incorporate a balance of these things. You have to know and accept there are going to be upsets somewhere at some points in time. So you throw a couple in. You don't go crazy with it, but you throw a couple in. You also know that more often than not, at least 1 or 2 of the number 1 seeds are going to make it to the Final Four. So I recommend having at least 1 number 1 seed, if not 2, in your Final Four brackets. And then the final thing we'll throw in here, before actually breaking down all the specific matchups and getting my picks, because I know that you're chomping at the bit. You can't wait to find out who I picked to win all 32 first-round games and, consequently through the other rounds, and why. But before that, my final bit of just bracketology philosophy is if you're truly trying to win money by filling out brackets and entering them in some sort of contest, the best thing you can do is fill out multiple brackets where you have a different team winning the championship in each bracket. If you can have 4 entries in a tournament and you're serious about winning something in that tournament, have 4 different entries and put a different national champion in each one of them. That's not to say your whole entire brackets need to be different, drastically different in each one. There's going to be some things that you feel strongly about that you kind of want to lock in, at least through rounds 1 and 2. But be flexible on all your teams and then the later rounds, because that's the rounds that you score more points in. And just the more opportunities you give yourself that way, the better chance you have to win something. So a lot of times, last year was a tough one for me picking. I'll admit last year was a tough tournament for my bracket picking, and my best one that I had on the tournament challenge on ESPN that I was in was one of the ones that I made just to be different and change it up and go, well, I've left out these teams quite a bit, and some people think highly of them and they're fairly highly ranked, so let's have a bracket or two where they do well instead of losing like I have them doing. So if you want to really truly win something, the more lines you throw in the lake, the better odds you have at catching a fish. All right. Well, alrighty then. Let's do it. Let's get buried balls deep in our bracket buster breakdown. Boom. It's got to be one of my better alliterations of all time here on the show, I think. But we'll start in the Southern region with not only the number one seed in the South, but the number one seed in the entire tournament and the number one team in college basketball this year, that being the Kansas Jayhawks. They have plenty of talent as usual. They're a perennial basketball powerhouse school. They have a head coach in Bill Self who has won an NCAA championship. However, he is also notorious. I think he's more famous for having number 1, 2, and 3 seed clubs in the tournament that lose in one of the first 3 rounds than for, being the type of coach that has good teams always advancing to the Sweet 16, Elite 8, and Final 4. His teams, for whatever reason, tend to be exceptionally good at doing choke jobs come NCAA tournament time. So if you're looking for a reason to not pick Kansas to win it all, Bill Self and just the track record he's got of blowing it at some point come tournament time, with the exception of the one championship season, is really what you can and should focus on, in my opinion. Now, that being said, they've got a fairly easy path, not necessarily all the way to the Final Four, but they've got a pretty easy path to the Elite 8, in my opinion. They should have no problems getting out of round 1 or 2 or 3, in my opinion. Maybe the Sweet 16 is the earliest I can see them going out, but knowing this frickin' Bill Self team, they could go out as early as round 2. But you don't need to worry about them for round 1. They are a lock because no number 1 seed has ever lost to a 16 seed in the NCAA tournament. Will it ever happen? I don't know. I'd say it's completely 50-50 coin flip. I could very much see it never happening ever, and I could see it happening via super close buzzer beater fashion sometime when maybe an undeserving number 1 seed has a really off game against a super lucky right place right time 16 seed. But I don't see this being the year that happens, even though this was one of the most parody-filled NCAA basketball seasons of all time. You can look at the numbers throughout the season. I'm not going to bore you with them right now, but know that if you didn't follow the season up until this point, that parity reigned supreme this college basketball season. So that would suggest that there's going to be a lot of upsets, at least one would think. However, whenever it has been of similar parity levels in the past, a number 1 seed has almost always won the tournament. So while a lot of favorites might not get knocked out, don't think that means this is going to be a year where a 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 seed win. No, it just means that all those ones who think they're towards the top and other people think they're towards the top but really aren't, are going to get weeded out by lesser teams, and the few elite teams, one of which I believe is Kansas, are going to separate themselves and hopefully find themselves playing for a college championship in Houston for the Final Four this year. But so anyway, your pick there is Kansas winning first round over Austin P.A. Austin Pay? Austin P.A. Zoo. I don't know. But anyway, Austin P. we'll call them. 16 seed. They're going down to Kansas. Nice job getting into the tournament, though. And, who knows? Maybe they'll at least make it interesting for a half or a little more than that. That would be cool. But moving on, then in the Southern Conference, we've got below them in our bracket the 8 seed Colorado taking on the 9 seed Connecticut. Connecticut is a small favorite to win that game. Small favorite being somewhere between a 50 to 65% chance of winning according to the ESPN BMI charts. That's how I did my list here as far as the favorites go. And we are picking Connecticut to win that game over Colorado, and here's why. when it comes to shooting, UConn shoots significantly better from the floor, and they are the best free throw shooting team in the entire tournament. Colorado is not a bad free throw shooting team, but they're bottom of the pack when it comes to shooting from the field. However, they are a good three-point shooting team, sixth best in the tournament. UConn, the 35th best three-point shooting team in the tournament. So offense, maybe slightly UConn. If you pref three-point shooting, then maybe slightly Colorado. Defensively, rebounding, Colorado is the best rebounding team in the tournament. But when you're playing a team that shoots well from the field, as UConn tends to, 32nd, 35th, first from the free throw line, it tends to negate that strength. Same with, one of the key ones I'm looking at, as I mentioned, is turnovers and steals. If you're a team that turns the ball over less and creates more turnovers, both those, than the team you're playing, I like that. Good chance of me picking you to win. But then turnovers, Colorado turns the ball over a lot, ranked 61st. UConn ranked 19th. And then steals, UConn does generate a few more steals as well. So that Colorado turning the ball over a lot and not shooting well from the field, those are big red flags. And not creating a lot of turnovers, 3 big red flags to me. That's it. That seals the deal. UConn over Colorado. Then moving down the bracket, we've got Maryland, 5 seed, taking on the 12 seed South Dakota State. And for the longest time, and in a lot of my brackets that I filled out, because I filled out multiple brackets, of course, in a lot of them I have South Dakota State winning this game. But in my official one for the show, upon further studying the numbers, I do have to pick Maryland, just to go with my philosophies. My gut still tells me South Dakota State's going to win this game, partly because I don't trust Maryland from seeing them lose to the Gophers this year. But when you look at the numbers, Maryland, 5th best in field goal percentage, 3rd best in free throw percentage, 19th best in three-pointers, all better than their opponent, South Dakota State. Defensively, South Dakota State rebounds a little bit better, but what difference does that make if the other team's shooting the ball good? Turnovers, Maryland does average 1 more turnover a game than South Dakota. When it comes to steals, South Dakota is not very good at creating many. Maryland just a little bit better. I think with, the field goal percentage, the free throw percentage, all of the shooting and offense negating the one big advantage that South Dakota State has, which is their rebounding. As long as Maryland avoids turning the ball over a ton, which South Dakota doesn't create a lot, they should win this game. And thus, based off of sound logic and reasoning, I have to readjust my pick here and go with Maryland. I just scratched them out on the list here. Maryland over South Dakota State, but my gut's still telling me South Dakota State might surprise that one, even though nothing on paper really suggests that they should. Or, well, not nothing, but it suggests that the odds of everything that needs to go their way going their way are less greater than Maryland. Moving on, we have 4 seed Carolina taking on, 13 seed Hawaii. And this one, California. Maryland is an average size favorite, by the way, meaning somewhere between 65 and 80% chance to win over South Dakota State. Moving on, California is a big favorite, meaning 80% or better, to beat 13 seed Hawaii. But I am picking Hawaii to win this game. This is one of my big key upset alerts that you can be really smart for picking. Offensively, field goal percentage, they're the same. 3-point shooting, Cal's better. Free throw shooting, Hawaii's better. Defensively, Cal rebounds a little better. Not a ton. Hawaii's still good at rebounding. They both turn the ball over quite a bit. However, here's the kicker. Cal creates hardly any turnovers a game. They're 68th in steals. Hawaii is 9th. You're talking double. California averages 4 steals a game. Hawaii averages 8 steals a game. So the fact that California is not going to be creating, you factor that into the 13 turnovers a game that Hawaii gets, and they're only going to be turning the ball over, maybe 8 or 9 times. And then you factor the 8 steals into the 12 turnovers that California gets, they're going to be turning the ball over 15 or 16 times. So you've got a 16 to 10 frickin' turnover ratio in this game likely in favor of Hawaii. And when both of the shooting, aside from 3-point shooting,